All right, apparently I'm live. I'm a couple of minutes early. I don't think anybody's here yet because nobody's expecting to be here because I never let anybody know what the fuck's going to happen. Am I supposed to say fuck in the first 2 minutes? Probably not. This show isn't for kids because I swear. Unless you don't mind your kids learning how to swear from a trucker who knows how to fucking swear. Just wanted to hopefully do a short stream today, and I'll start saying goodbye and go for another hour. Oftentimes, had a rough week last week. Finding out how hard it was to move around. I've said this so many times. It's very easy to sit quietly and feel that I am getting better quicker than I actually am. And I looked at myself in the mirror this morning and said, "You look like shit, man." And I'm looking at myself on the camera and I feel the same way. I haven't shaved my face in a few days, probably the better part of a week. I brushed my beard this morning, but it needs a good oiling and conditioning. I have a beard oil that helps my beard get soft and well conditioned. It seems to help with having a beard's great and it protects from a lot of things, but it also sometimes if you don't clean carefully, you can end up getting like little skin irritations or whatever. And the oil seems to help. I don't know if it catches this stuff before it hits my skin. I have allergies like crazy. And this time of year, even though I'm inside, I feel them coming. And my wife did something really awesome for us and opened up some windows while we had really beautiful weather on the weekend. I think some of the pollens and stuff got in here, and I feel a little more something. Anyway, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how rough it is to be sick, but how much drive I have to get better. And this week I'm going to try to make a focused effort on doing more every day than I have in the last week. Because last week, I think I was taking either too big of a step at a time or too small of a step in reaction to things. Now, this week, I'm going to try to push through some things, but I'm going to try to be as reasonable as possible. That seems to be where my downfall is when I try to push and I get somewhere I don't want to be. Which is really tired or dizzy or yesterday I had a nap in the afternoon. Stayed up and watched Bad Science Sunday. And what I managed to do was work with Dr. Tapioca Weasel's bingo program, which I think he did a pretty good job at, and I enjoy it. I enjoy doing bingo. I don't even care about playing bingo. I do play, but I enjoy making up the call words. I've done a few. The main one for Dapper Dino's channel was already written. I've added a few options on that one in the past, and I think it was great that Tap wrote that program up, and I don't know. I think it's fun because there's so many predictable things. For last night's BSS one, I had early access to the video, and I was able to go through it and check it out and make some call words, whatever you want to call them. So I got two things I'm working on this week. One is getting my body in shape, and the other one is getting my mind in shape and wrapping it around my fellowship project. And so today I'm gonna try to walk on the treadmill a minimum of 2 times. And hopefully that'll help me. And I'm going to try to do a little bit more weight working out too, so that the weight bearing exercises are not so hard. I think I've got to focus in on that. And I've decided my biggest issue is writing stuff down, having a to-do list, which I usually sort of always had when I was in construction. I'd have this big to-do list of things to do, people to phone. I'd write it out, I'd cross things off, and then I'd write them right back in again. But I had a different life then, and now when I'm at work as a trucker, which I'm feeling really weird about not having done in 2 months, but when I'm at work as a trucker, they have a to-do list. The dispatch has it, and they give me what I need to do. And the work I do is repetitive enough. I don't really need a checklist. I thought about making one in the early days, but then I realized, this is it's the same every time for certain things. And if there's a special thing to think about, repetition sort of builds the memory on that. Although I have thought I would do well to make myself like a repeatable checklist on my phone and just go through it before I leave a site with a machine, or drop one off, just to make sure, you don't forget something. You don't want to leave your keys somewhere. One of my colleagues did that one time, and he realized that I was going to a customer's yard to pick up their equipment that he had been to, and I think what he had dropped off one machine and actually left his keys in it the night before. The last thing he did, and he was tired and forgot his keys. I went to pick up another one of their machines, and when he realized I was going there, he's like, "Hey, can you check and see if I dropped my keys? I think I left them in the machine." And sure enough, I can't remember if they were sitting in the ignition or sitting on the floor, but there they were. So I was able to help him get his keys back. But it reminded me that's something I could do, right? And I do sort of have this like repetition in my muscle memory where I'll just check myself for a few things, and I don't usually forget stuff like that, but it does happen. And what you don't want to do is leave something undone that's key. And so I sort of feel like that's what I've been doing with my life. While I'm resting myself and getting my lungs in shape and handling the fact that I can't handle some things, I'm at the same time, I'm just I'm not getting better fast enough. And I'm going to try to do something about that, while at the same time not pushing myself faster than my body can heal. And it feels like a losing battle. I just realized that I've been doing my physio exercises some days, and then I think I've gone the whole weekend without doing them a single time. So that's no good. I also found something this morning that reminded me of something I was doing a few years ago, which is I had a notebook. And this notebook was supposed to be for writing down things to help me deal with my mental and emotional trauma and dealing with that. And I think I probably haven't sorted that out yet. It's probably not a done deal, but what I found interesting is I looked at that book and I was like, some days I would write that down, and then other days I had like sketches from work of things that needed to be done or things that needed to be built, or I'd sketched out a building so I could figure out how much lumber was required for it or something. I realized that like in the past, my career has taken over my life. Even in the face of having to deal with like severe issues with my mental health. And being forced to take time off of work has had me think, I got to do something more important with my life than just working. It's not that I don't love my job. I want to keep doing it. I want to get back at it too, because I need the money and first and foremost, but I also just fucking enjoy it. It's a fun thing to do. I think I said at one point I might like do a thing where I talk about the different equipment I move. I don't know whether that's something people find interesting or not, but anyway, I don't think people find me interesting at all this morning. One person is here. It looks like, but I don't know if that counter means anything. There might be 5 people here. There might be 0 people here. I don't know who's showing up to listen to an old trucker rant and rave about stuff. But I'm gonna share something interesting that I'm working on. And I'm gonna look at this app. I don't know if I'll share the app specifically on screen, but I'm gonna look at it here. And I've been doing a lot of AI art this weekend, playing with how that works. And I've gotten some interesting characters here. I think I'm gonna like I don't know. I'm gonna do more of it. I like doing it. I'd like to make my own art too, like draw things out and whatnot. But you know, I guess what I got to do is talk about what my project is going to be a little bit. So, but I'm not supposed to like let the cat out of the bag too much. And having almost no followers, it's not going to be such a big deal. Anyway, this thing's called Story Plotter, and so it's interesting. So I've made a character, and I'm going to have a bunch of characters with my partner and I in the fellowship. We're basically just gonna do this thing where we present people with knowledge that'll help them understand what it's like for people living with diabetes and obesity. Oftentimes living with the two together. And we got some great stories. We don't have this out for people to give us permission to use all their stories, and I'm not going to tell their stories directly. And I have some other stories people have shared with me I'd love to share again. Um, But I'm gonna say what I want to do is I want to change the way people think about stuff. And I had a very interesting exchange this weekend with a gentleman. I don't know everybody's name that I talk to on these things, and they have handles anyway. So I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just an example of someone. Now, this is someone who I take it is from somewhere in Britain. Um, and we were talking about living with obesity, and they basically it sort of came up accidentally and organically because they called me Big Al because they were trying to confirm my name. Um, I'm sure people are aware that if you write Al with a lowercase l, it looks also like AI. So some people think I'm AI trucker, and I'm not. Um, what I am is Al trucker because my name's Al. And a lot of people do call me Big Al. I don't know where that comes from. Another Big Al that there is Fat Albert. It was a character that Bill Cosby created, and Bill Cosby was a funny and creative man, but it's hard to have any respect for him because it sounds like he was also a sexual predator and an absolute bullshit kind of human being, which I think a lot of people are really upset about, um, myself included, because I grew up watching his shows, listening to his comedy, and I liked watching Fat Albert, the cartoon. And I think they remade Fat Albert into like a live action show. Um, and as a kid, Fat Albert was maybe one of the first things you could look at as someone to look up to as a fat kid, someone who lived with obesity. I think it's too bad that Bill Cosby turned out to be an asshole and a really unfortunate behavior. And I don't know where that comes from. And I want to say that some people have indicated to me more than once. This is not about a specific person. Um, because I've run into this story being told to me over and over again, and I don't know why people are comfortable sharing this with me. But I must seem like an empathetic person. Um, and I would not want to ever. Um, I don't understand the mentality of someone who commits a sexual assault. Um, but I've had people who are survivors of sexual assault confide in me that that's happened to them, and when this has happened, it's been shocking and upsetting, and my gut reaction is not a good one. You my gut reaction is to want to help protect that person from that happening ever again, because I don't think that's a fair thing to have happen. And I've had people say weird things to me about stuff like that too, where how do you judge what God says? God sort of condones treating women like property and committing sexual assaults, and it seems to me that it's something that's been explained to me as done as a power move, not as a something for, either sexual gratification or for romance or anything like that. And I guess that's what's hard to understand as someone who would rather, um, I would rather have a sexual partner that wants to be my partner. I get more from that than I just can't imagine or put myself in the mindset where I'd want to have power over another person in that way, especially with something that was harmful or hurtful to them. That wouldn't, uh, that wouldn't make me happy. I don't like hurting people on purpose, and I can't imagine wanting to take control of someone else's life. I'd rather that people take control of their own lives, and then we work together to make things better as a community. And so when I hear things like that, it makes me very upset, and my gut reaction is actually to wanna go and hurt people that are hurting other people because I wanna stop them dead in their tracks, which is possibly paradoxical, or it's maybe just understandable that you want to protect people in your community from being hurt. And then it gets into this whole thing of like who's on what side. This othering of people and saying this type of person is with me and that type of person is not. And we get into politics. We get into religion. We get into this weird sort of thing where there's like science and anti-science. Um, I listened to a lot of people talk about stuff like that over the weekend, and it sort of ended with Bad Science Sunday last night, and it got me to thinking. It was hilarious, right? Um, and one of the call things on it was they actually said science TM, and I put that in because I was hoping they get through the video, and I was like, oh, it's a 40-minute long video. They're never in an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're never gonna get through this with a guest and talking about, hey Jimmy, I knew it while I was making the bingo card up, but I was thinking about that. I was thinking about the mentality, the us versus them mentality, to the point where this group of young men, young in that they're younger than me, they're all adults. It looks like, um, and they're they're putting down science. They say science TM, like it's this trademark sort of idea. It's not a real part of human um, knowledge and the thirst for figuring out what's going on. They want to make it a religion. They want to make it something to fight against, something to rail against. Um, and interestingly, they brought up like a gazillion different different things that fall into conspiracy theory, and they fall into a lot of different stuff. They touched on the prophecies of Tolkien and all this kind of stuff. It's just really really wild, going through it. And they believe in the sunken Atlantis. They believe, and what they believe is actually science and what isn't is just all over the place. And it made me think a little bit after that. I'm talking to people about things that they believe in, and you got to wonder why they believe them. And so I'll go back to this conversation I had because is something that intersects with my life. The there was actually two gentlemen I was speaking to, and they were basically saying that obesity is something that is just simple. One of them was saying it's simple physics, is calories in, calories out, which is true to a point. And I'm going to explain why that's not 100% true in a second. But they also, it's fair that people have this idea because this is what they're told. And what I'm trying to do with my project is tell the stories of the real humans behind the stories and behind the things that are done to hurt people, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. And this is what I got a lot of feedback from. And I've actually had more than one person tell me that they were abused, and their size and their looks because of their size were used against them to put them down as a person, to devalue them. And I think abusers often do that. And the number of people that have told me that in confidence, and I'm not talking about any specific person, I'm talking about the wild um the wild statistic that I get from just people that tell me this directly, and then the things I read, um, indirectly, where people are sharing more generally, where the same thing comes up about people that have abused and mistreated them, and that's caused them to have a worsening mental state, and the worsening mental state has led to stress and um, a combination of poor eating habits, like not caring, having bad mental thoughts about themselves, low self confidence and stuff like that. Self esteem, self confidence are words that are used often, and used to abuse and manipulate people. And worst of all is I think they and I don't want to speak for them directly because they don't all say this, but they all said I believed it, and I believe it too, despite the fact that I've never been sexually assaulted or abused. I have been mentally and emotionally abused in my life, and that may be my understanding of that may be part of why people feel comfortable sharing directly to me. But I've also tried to go out of my way to share my experiences and my stories, and it's been pretty effective. What I'm hoping to do with my life going forward, and I've thought about this a lot, is to become an effective communicator. And I've never worked very strongly or very well at being an effective communicator. But people tell me that I am anyway. So if I have a natural talent for it, maybe what I need to do is take some time to learn more about that and learn how to do that in the best possible way. In in having obesity, living with obesity, there's a huge metabolic component to it, and all people can gain a few pounds, 20, 30, 40 pounds, even 50 pounds, just by not eating correctly. And that will not do your body a whole lot of good if it's fat tissue. Especially, there's two types of fat tissue that the body gains. One is what they call white fat, and then there's another one they call brown fat. And the brown fat, I believe, is the good one. It doesn't really matter which one's the good one, but one of them is a better fat to have than the other. The one that I have too much of, and what might not be apparent looking at me here. I mean, I think you can see I'm not a tiny man, but like this is this is a very huge um, belly that I have. But I don't want to take my shirt off and show you just how bad I look. Um, but I have also extremely muscular legs and arms and upper body and shoulders, so that some of my overall mass is not just adipose tissue. The problem is, and this is something I should have found some graphics for this, but excess adipose tissue around the internal organs causes a lot of problems. And the buildup of this is caused by a lot of different metabolic functions, but largely from the endocrine system. And I'm not a doctor, and I do not play one on television. I'm not qualified to be teaching people about this. I've read up on this a fair bit. I should do a lot more. But the endocrine system is a hormone regulation system in simple terms. And our hormones will fight against things for some people's bodies that work well for others. And so what ends up happening is you end up having a yo-yo diet thing is something that people have used as a term to describe it. So you go up, you go down. And I remember very well the first time that I decided to go on a diet for the purpose of losing weight. When I was in high school, I ate to increase my size and strength to play rugby and football. Um, and it wasn't I didn't have like a great sort of plan. I had some weights. I lifted weights some of the time. If I'd known then what I know now, and like if my son or my daughter decided to play contact sports, I would highly recommend to them weight training regime that I wish I had done. I wish I had known more and done something with a plan in mind. And my knowledge about how to do that was gained many years later. Um, my my weight in my 20s never got over 300, but by the time I was in my early 30s, I was at 330 or thereabouts. My weight crept up from in the 200 low 200s. From the age of 15 onwards, I never got under 200. When I was never the kind of player that was going to go on to anything. I didn't even bother thinking about where I would have gone in university, playing that ball. But I had a friend from my team that did go on to do that. I probably could have played at the level he was playing at if I'd pushed myself towards it. But I ended up going into work immediately. And that the work that I was doing, I was already doing it. I quit. I actually quit the last year. I didn't play rugby because I was too busy working. My father's company needed my support, and it ended up that it became my company and became my baby and my problem all at once, which was good and bad. I spent 28 years doing that, and the more I needed to work in the office, the less I was out working on tools, and the less I was out working, the more I was driving around, going to places, and doing less and less moving around. And my eating habits were terrible for many years. And I realized looking back that I was sometimes binge eating, not in a way you see portrayed sometimes in movies or television. There's a movie called The Whale, which is a really good movie. I don't think it's a really good depiction of living with obesity. I think it's a really good depiction of how mental health really impacts body, and how the body works and how people think. This particular person is played um, by is it Brendan Fraser, I believe, who's known for a bunch of other movies. I think this one is kind of different because I think he was in like the Mummy series, which I've never seen any of. I know he was in the movie with Pauly Shore about I think it was called Encino Man. I think that might have been one of his early roles, and he's a Canadian, so he's a well respected actor here. We tend to really push and like our homegrown heroes in Canada. So you sometimes hear more about them. And I learned about this movie mostly because I was working with people at Obesity Canada, and I got to see a special screening of it at a conference. It was back in 23. I think that was the year it came out. Yeah, if you're okay with seeing that kind of movie, I definitely recommend it. It's called The Whale. Um, and I've been called a whale. I've been even in junior high, people noticed how much bigger I was than everybody else and made fun of the way adipose tissue was collecting on my body. Um, it only changed when I got to high school, and being big really fit in well to being a defensive end. It fit in well to being a prop in rugby. I really enjoyed rugby. I loved the game of rugby because there's a lot more movement. I wasn't in great shape for it, and I've still had asthma and stuff, but I was able to move quickly enough to do the job I had to do. I never was able to really. I was able to help us score goals many times, but I was never able to score a try myself. But I was instrumental in playing the game and moving us ahead. And we were a competitive team. Um, I would have liked to put more time into it and gotten better at it because I enjoyed it so much. But life got in the way, which is what it does. And my eating habits, I didn't pay any attention to until I was a little ways into my adulthood, because I found out I only had one kidney, and so I started doing something about that. Getting a low glucose alarm, which is probably just because I'm also now not eating the way I should, and so to silence this thing. So I ate breakfast. I don't know if this would come up here. I don't think it's visible. Um, I was fine all night. Ate breakfast. It spiked and then it tanked. And I'm on medication to help that not happen. But This is what life with diabetes is like. Your endocrine system struggles with hormones like insulin, and there's other hormones too that are in our systems, and there's also this process in the body where it protects and conserves energy. So what ends up happening is a lot of times people are eating a wrong number of calories per day. So let's just say that my body, I happen to know my body needs something like 2,800 to 3,000 calories per day. Now, if you think about it, if you go to a fast food restaurant, a single meal, burger, fries, and especially if you get a pop that isn't diet pop, um, you end up in a situation where you're maybe eating 1,800 to 2,200 calories in that one sitting quite easily. Um, so there you go. That's well over half your intake. If you're me, if you're me, that's half your intake of what you would just burn in a day. Because like if you eat it and you burn it off, nothing's going to change. That's physics. That's what the people I was talking to on this thing. It was actually like a flat Earth Globers type science debate community that this happened at. So it's not surprising. Although like these people and they're not flat earthers, so they understand and believe in science. It's just physics: the calories you take in, and the calories that you burn, and that is not entirely true. If your body feels like you're starving it, it will start to conserve fat tissue preferentially. Bodies will actually eat away at their own muscle and bone because muscle first, but muscle will burn more calories, and so the body will focus on conserving energy in a way that isn't helpful to someone like myself because my body has done a really fucking great job at conserving energy. And every time I try to go on a diet, if I don't do it right, I regain weight pretty quickly. And in the state that I'm in now, I'm huge. 300, let's just say 330 pounds to use a round number because it does fluctuate. But I was 405 pounds in 2020, April 2020. I looked it up. Well, 405. And this month I've been at 225. So you 75 plus 5, that's 80 pounds I've lost. I'm just going to assume I've regained 5. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. I haven't weighed myself in 3 weeks. I'm planning not to weigh myself these days. But I know I haven't regained a ton of weight because I've been eating a little bit less. But some days I feel extra hungry. So my hunger signals aren't the same as everyone else's. But I've changed my diet again and it's helped me because I've lost a couple of pounds that I had on, but I feel better when I'm not feeling sick with this lung infection bullshit. I was feeling better because for like a month, at least a month before I got sick, I was eating better because I was following the guidelines from bariatric surgery program. And the guidelines say that you should be eating fruits, fresh fruits and vegetables, or frozen is a second best choice. High quality proteins from meats, nuts, and other sources are okay. They're not my cup of tea, so I've been using good lean meats. You eat a lower fat, high protein, and complex carbs only kind of diet. So, what I've been doing that's off of that recently, and it's kind of helping me get some energy going in the morning, but I need to play with it a little bit. Is I've been eating some processed carbs in the way of gluten-free cereal that my wife's been picking up for me, which I appreciate. It does help me get going because it helps get my sugars going and helps me get some energy to start in the morning. And that's something I've needed so I can get up off the couch and feel not lethargic. But if I look at the chart, I can see and I remember in my early 20s saying, okay, well, I got to spend some time getting some exercise. I had already joined a gym before I found this out, but I joined a gym and it was close to my house, and I would go work out there like 3 times a week. I would ride my bike around as much as I could, like my bicycle, not my motorcycle. I loved motorcycles even back then, but I just wasn't paying attention to it. I was just riding a bicycle, and I rode a bicycle throughout my childhood, despite my father being super afraid of it and anti-bicycle. So I think it had something to do with his father had some sort of terrible experience with a bicycle. I think he witnessed or was involved in a bicycle accident. My father's father, and he was dead set against bicycles as a mode of transport. But I rode my bike around as a kid, like from the first time I got on a tricycle, I was pretending I was on a motorcycle. And I'm sure I've told people there was a motorcycle dealership very close to where I grew up, and I walked by it all the time. And I walked by it every day on my way to school. And I looked in the window at those motorcycles, and man, I love those motorcycles. I begged my mother to let me go in and get brochures, which she did one time. She let me go and see them, and they even let me sit on one. But my mother was never going to let me ride a motorcycle. She had to, I think, beg my father to let me have a bicycle because that was just what I wanted. And once I got a bicycle, I was a happy kid, and I loved riding my bicycle. I was never going to be in the Tour de France or anything like that. I never got good at doing tricks, but I just like going places. I like being on wheels, something that I do now as a career. And my bike is working, and I got out for a ride on my bike last week, and I got to go to the drugstore today, pick up medicine for myself and my son. I'm going to go on a short ride. I'm feeling not dizzy at all today. I'm feeling good. But I tell you, last week or on the weekend, I went on Saturday morning, I drove in my truck. So that's why I rode my motorcycle. I rode my motorcycle to go get my x-ray. I had the wrong requisition. Hey, Sumami, good to see you. Welcome. You say cello, I'm going to say bass. I think I'm closer to bass than cello. I think I call that baritone, I'm not sure. My singing voice is terrible, though. I'll try to avoid bothering people. It's Sumami, it's good to see you. Turbo time. Ember, how are you doing? Well, I'm going to try and get my ass in gear this week, Ember. It's nice to see you, ladies. Thank you for coming by. You're absorbed in Sims and forgot to come in for 30 minutes. So there you go. Turbo. Yeah, I got to get that snail. Got to get the bearings redone in the snail and spin her right up there. I think twin turbo. I think that twin turbo on a C15 would be pretty cool. I don't think they usually do that though, and I guess I don't really need it. But yeah. Yeah, Ember, you can tell me what you think of that. I'd like your opinion. I want to get a C15 backed by an 18, a fuller 18 speed. But Sumami, I've been talking about living in a large body, and I've been talking about a whole bunch of stuff. I started my conversation today, and people can go back and watch it. I've been going on and on about a bunch of stuff, but I'm talking about some of the hazards of living in a large body and some of what goes on with it, and some of the misapprehensions people have. But also about how I need to get my body working again, and I can feel now just sitting here how damaged my lungs still are. I can feel it this morning that my lungs are working hard for me to speak. And so that means I'm going backwards. I haven't showed people this widely. I shared it with Dr. Tapp, and my family's looked at it. Dr. Tapp, of course, I do recommend if you whether or not you have a mole anywhere, find some generic photos of moles on scrotums and just like get a close in shots of them and just send them randomly to Dr. Tapp and ask him for help. More turbo sounds good. 18 gives good power control. Yeah. Ember C15 is it's an older engine. The Acert Caterpillar C15 engine is one that I like driving a lot. The fleet I work for, they have a C18 on one of the tow trucks, I think, and it is just turned right up, I believe. I think they've got it really good. The turbo, to get into the basics of what a turbo is any sort of ice engine is basically an air pump. And the air pump is driven by compression ignition in a diesel engine and spark ignition in a gasoline or propane engine, or an alcohol engine for that matter as well. So diesel is the only one that's compression fired that I know of. There may be other technologies that people have developed, but none of them are still in use. Steam engines were sort of the first um, types of engines where piston style pressure was used to rotate things, and that rotation is just translated into forward motion. But if you turbos are interesting because what they do is they take the exhaust part of the pump and they take some of that and they have vanes in them, and the vanes are spun by the exhaust. And when they're spun by the exhaust, they then push air. And so what you're doing is you're taking the exhaust part and adding more, yeah, more pressure, more heat. But yeah, Boyle's law is right. But what the turbo does is it pushes more air into the intake. And so by putting more air in at higher pressure, the engine can run more efficiently and get more power at low, like with a lower amount of initial um, torque from atmospheric pressure. By building that pressure up, the engine runs and gets more power more efficiently. And if you blow your turbo on a diesel, you'll just limp along because the diesels are actually engineered to work with turbos. And if you see older trucks from the 1980s and earlier, a lot of them weren't turboed on the diesel, and they just ran and they just sort of putted along. They got the job done. Um, but the advent of the turbo and having it be the standard to have a turbo diesel changed trucking forever. Um, and it's a very, very interesting thing. For an intercooler, it makes the heat air cooler. Yes, intercoolers help. So yeah, trees. You're right. And trees, I think, trees and Ember probably know more about the science and stuff behind it. But the turbo thing is just a reference. I'm building up my body back to where it was, and since my lungs are what's wrong, and the term used in the industry is naturally aspirated versus turbo. Naturally aspirated means it's just the local air pressure around the air intake. That's the air you get to deal with. Um, and you can put a scoop on or something like that for like a race car, but you have to be going pretty fast to scoop air and actually have it do something to your air intake. But a turbo actually puts pressure on it. The intercooler helps cool down that air because the colder and denser the intake air, the better. But you also don't want it to be dirty. So typically what they do is they want and a carburetor, yeah. Yeah, carburetors are a very simple way to look at like um, gas air mixture. Um, so gasoline, and what I guess what it is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a gas vapor laden air into a gasoline engine, and the diesel one, you're injecting diesel, and this is what the common rail diesels where there's like this high pressure injection. They have super high pressure injectors that actually are like vaporizing the oil in a diesel. And what happens on the power stroke is like when the piston comes up, it's pressurizing little droplets of oil into such a small place that they actually um I don't think detonates the right word, but they compress to the point of igniting, and that ignition pushes down on the piston, and that's translated into like shaft rotation. So all of these pistons work together. I think most people are familiar with the concept. And the turbo pushes that air in. And air is what I don't have, right? So like my body is dying. So I'm it's an analogy. It's an analogy, maybe not a good one, but I need to get my air intake working so that my heart can pump and my lungs and my heart need to work together so that I can have oxygen in my muscles and I can work for more than 5 minutes without collapsing, getting dizzy, or even just stand up from a sitting or laying position without feeling like I'm not getting quite enough air into myself. The good news is I keep checking my blood oxygen level. My blood oxygen level is good. And when I'm feeling good, I'm feeling good. But when I went to the hospital on Saturday morning, I did not take my walker with me because I'm a proud man and I'm an idiot. And I had trouble walking myself back out to my truck. And halfway home, I told my wife, I said, I'm telling you that I'm coming home right now because I may have to pull over. And I'm hoping you don't have to get me or anything, but I'm just letting you know that if I don't feel good, I'm going to pull over and stop. And I told her where I was and which way I would come so that if I didn't somehow show up or didn't talk to her, she'd know to come out and find me. I was really surprised at how easily derailed I was on Saturday. And that was the end of a week where I felt derailed multiple times from doing little things. I did a little bit of exercise and I did it in a live stream. Yeah. The high density, yeah, and see, Ember, that's a good point, but I know if you have detonation, that's used as a word in a gasoline engine, it's wrong because it means if you have detonation, it means that your mixture's wrong and it's usually something that's caused by having the detonation is something that comes from like bad timing. And bad timing comes from usually using the wrong type of gas, the wrong octane level. And you have to use the right octane for the engine that you have. You should just as a point of like keeping everybody's vehicle in good shape, use the type of gasoline in a gas engine that's recommended in your manual. Don't don't fuck around with it. And if you don't know what's going on, talk to a mechanic. If you do know what's going on, and if you're like me, I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to mechanics. I can fix certain systems, like if a pipe is broken or something, I can tell it's broken. I've fixed parts of my truck to limp it home many times if it has to do with something with coolant. If it's something I can fix with a hose and a hose clamp, or something I can fix by checking some wiring or fixing wiring or something like that, I can handle it. But if it's I'm not going to be rebuilding an engine. I just understand the basics. Um, yeah. Yeah, and Ember, like I should put this up here. What Ember said, she's quite right. This is about definitions, but I think also when it comes to mechanics and their terminology, it might be a little bit more casually used. But when they say there's detonation in an engine, it usually means there's a timing spark problem in a what do they call it? The combustion chamber, and that's usually something that's fixed by octane. By having the right octane, you get the right spark for the engine's timing. Um, anyway, there's a lot that goes into it. The analogy of how a human body works. The human body needs oxygen, and so does an internal combustion engine. So I got to work on getting that oxygen. And honestly, my wife keeps telling me I need to give myself grace because that's what my doctor told me, and she was very very nice. My wife's extremely nice too. The doctor was very nice to me when I was getting discharged. She's like, "You're gonna go home. This is gonna take some time." I don't. She said, "I don't know if it'll be weeks or even a month or more," but the infectious disease doctor came and talked to me too, and the respirologist about like how bad my illness was and how much damage it had done. The respirologist said, typically, for every day that you spend in the hospital, you're going to need at least 3 days at home to recover. So take 16 days, multiply it by 3. Well, that's not hard to do the math on. It's 45 plus 3. So that's 48 days, which is well over a month. And I've been at home for just over a month. A month and a few days. So if I have 2 more weeks ahead of me, I'd be on schedule for a normal person. When they told me this, you're in a big body. Big bodies take longer to heal because there's a lot more to get back to. And I had a chance to share that on Monday when I was at the obesity summit, which was an online summit, but I was there all day. I think it started at 9 in the morning, went to 4 in the afternoon, something like that. We had a couple of breaks. I think they shortened it. I think what we did was we worked through one break and just, we had the afternoon session was longer than the morning session by like 45 minutes, but we agreed to do that so that instead of having a half-hour break and coming back, we'd just keep running. um, which I appreciate, but it also meant that it was packed, time-wise, and it was a lot. It was a lot. I needed a lot of naps last week, and that's the kind of thing that made me need a nap. Why should I need a nap just talking to people about something that I'm well informed about, which is what it's like to live my life in a large body, right? Susan Boyle, more volume, win the competition. Susan Boyle was that wonderful singer from the UK, right? Right, Sumami. I remember her. I think people also think she was someone in a larger body and not necessarily what you expect from a stage performer singing, because I think we've gotten used to certain people singing us songs. If we're going to talk about, if I'm going to talk about people living in different bodies, I was talking about like how nutrition profile is important in how you eat, and about how the body will take away your muscle and your bone. People with eating disorders are people that I encounter in my volunteer work, trying to help people living in larger bodies, or people with body dysmorphia and other eating disorders suffer this really badly, and it's possible to be under the misapprehension that your body is too big and keep working to reduce its size. And people on both ends of the spectrum have terrible disease. And jokes are made about it, and I sometimes snicker at them and laugh at them, but I realize I shouldn't, because they're very terrible diseases. One of the popular things to do is to sell 6XL shirts to say I beat anorexia. Um, and I could certainly wear one of those, and it would fit perfectly, because like the shirt I'm wearing now is a 6XL. Um, but people come in all different shapes and sizes, and um, I know that Sumami and I've had conversations about how my neck is the same circumference as her waist. But Sumami's a lovely person who is in her body, and her body is fine, and the same with everybody else, right? My body is my body. My body would be healthier if I had less adipose tissue, but I don't think I'm going to stop being a big guy, because I think like my muscle and bone structure is just that way. I'm hoping to come out of this going back to being closer to, maybe not exactly, but closer to the body I had when I was a rugby player in high school. I don't expect to get back to my high school weight. I just like to be in that kind of shape, able to move my body around with relative ease, and have the muscle and bone, but a lot less of the adipose tissue. And that's where I was at. People called me a fat cow and a whale and all sorts of things back then. Um, I think I've said this before. Someone wrote "fat" in a Sharpie marker over my face on my grad picture that was hung up in the hallway at my school. By now, it's so long ago that that picture's probably been put in storage, but because that was a long time ago. But somebody felt like, and I was one of the biggest people in my school. You know, I don't know if I was the fattest person in my graduating class. Probably was. Probably somebody needed to write that there to let everybody know, because nobody could tell. Funny thing is, I didn't really have a lot of enemies in high school. I got along with everybody, or at least I felt like I did. But I honestly did. There was nobody. I didn't. I was an athlete, so I got along with the jocks. I was on the yearbook committee, so I knew everybody from everything. I was into photography. I was into art. I was into industrial arts. I was into science. I liked math a little bit. I wasn't great at it. I really liked science. I really liked English. I In industrial arts, I helped with stage building so I knew people in drama. I knew people in the band. We intersected with all those people. Um, I was maybe just kind of an all around kind of a person back then, and it's funny. I was telling Dr. Tapp that I applied to Fine Arts University, and I had a portfolio of artwork in my OAC year, and which is grade 13 here. We don't have it anymore, but we had it at the time. This is like 30 years ago, and I flew to Montreal to apply to this fine art school, and he thought I was joking. I still think he thinks I made it up. But I really liked doing artwork back then. I liked I was never into drama as like a a performer, but Chris, it was on the show last night with BSS. He was talking about being an actor, right? Is that right? I think so. I don't remember things very well. I was half asleep for a lot of it, but I tried to stay up because I wanted to help support the bingo program. Um, anyway, I'm sorry, I'm feeling really weird right now. Just gonna take a few breaths if that's okay with everybody. I've probably been talking too long. So this is what happens to me. I get tired. My lungs need to work. Yeah, Chris is an actor. That's right. Okay. So I was never a thespian. I was never an actor. I tried it. I didn't like it, but I did like reading. I liked reading dramatic things, and actually, I was Dr. Tapp was super super nice to me and my family this weekend, and my daughter in particular. My daughter's been studying math at school. This is the term she's doing math, and she's on I think in the U.S. you'd call it AP mathematics. But she's doing prep to do the IB program, which she's not sure she wants to do, but she's doing all the base work so she can do it. So the math she's doing in what we call grade 10 here, is a little more advanced than what you might do in a standard grade 10 class. And Dr. Tapp's pretty well versed in math, so he's helped her and helped me too, because I'm actually trying to learn math again and bring myself back to where I was. And go back and get it again and get it in my brain and keep it there. I didn't succeed at higher level math. I was too busy trying to help my dad run his company and get construction projects done in my later years. I don't even know why I ever thought I would do that. I also wanted to be a helicopter pilot. I was all over the goddamn place. I mean, how I need to go and get a test to see if I have ADHD, I don't fucking know. But I wanted to become a helicopter pilot. I wanted to do art, and I really liked reading dramatic things. And I remember like one of the, I don't know if it was a soliloquy or a speech from Hamlet, and I remember the first little bit of it, usually fairly well. I don't know if my brain will remember it right now, but I said it to my daughter and Dr. Tapp the other day, just off the top of my head. And it starts, a little month, where'er those shoes were old with which you followed my poor father's body, like Nairobi, all tears. That's what I remember. Yeah, well, you know what, Ember, that's why you have a stabilizer rotor at the back for the helicopters. But yeah, interestingly, I have never been on a helicopter in my life. And for some reason, I've wanted to pilot one. I have piloted an airplane. I have learned about traditional fixed wing flight and a little bit about helicopters. A lot of the things are very similar, that you need to know the base knowledge. But rotary blade aircraft are pretty fucking cool. But they are crazy, Ember. I agree with that. Anyway, I'm sure I drove away my entire audience with my little Shakespearean line there, and if I kept on going, it would drive everyone away. But I enjoyed reading Shakespeare. I understood Elizabethan English fairly well. Other people had a lot of trouble with it, and I don't know why it wasn't a problem for me. Language is something I've just sort of always been able to handle, and it may help that my mother was a teacher, and she was a reading specialist. She also my mother majored in Latin for university, which is just a weird thing to do. But my mother knew and understood language very well. My mother even taught. She studied French and Latin in high school. She went on to study Latin in university, and she taught French language a little bit to elementary school students, but she many times was just teaching people English, and she taught a lot of new immigrants and their children. She taught a lot of them to read and write and speak in English. Yeah, we're all nerds here. Yeah, and trees. Oh man, one day I want to meet trees. I think I love your avatar, trees. I don't know if I've said that recently, but it's like a is it like part of the Ents or something? It looks to be a voluptuous female humanoid made of tree. I don't know if people can see that because I don't know what people may be listening to what I'm saying or they may not. But he's flown in many helicopters, repelled out of them. I've never been in one, so the closest I ever got to getting in a helicopter. Well, twice. Once you know what? After I committed to my father that I would work for his company, I got offered that I could go to helicopter school out of town, and I decided that I would maintain my promise to my father and finish 5 years working for him. Um, which 28 years later, I broke the promise, and he knew I went into trucking before he died, and he was supportive of it. He understood where I was coming from. I had a I had a conversation with him, and I was expecting some pushback, but I told him about how I was feeling and the stress and what my doctor had told me about the stress of running a business was going to kill me. After I spent over a week in the hospital, and they were scanning my heart and going in and seeing if I needed a stent and all this stuff, which I didn't, thankfully. But, in a lot of ways, I wish maybe I'd learned to fly helicopters. I'm kind of waiting to win the lottery. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if I win the lottery, I'll probably go back to learning to fly again. Just because I love operating different machines. Um, and I guess, I mean, technically, I've never been in a submarine either. I think I visited a submarine once at like one of those like Navy shows, but yeah, that was a long time ago. I don't even think I went in it. I think we like went right by it. Um, Submarines are cool. Aircraft are cool. Um, Trucks are cool. Construction equipment, like I just love all that shit, right? So my job moving construction and equipment and cranes and stuff around just floats my boat. Driving a big truck floats my boat. I remember like being a child on. I've never been in a spaceship. I went to Cape Canaveral as a kid, and my dad and my mom took a few pictures. But back then, like film was like expensive, right? Um, it's wild stuff. All those rockets and stuff. But at the time I went to visit, I was young. I was there at a time when the shuttle program was in its infancy, in the very early 80s. Um, I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and that was the trip to Cape Canaveral. Prior to that, it was actually the first time I was ever hospitalized. I was 4 years old. I was in Florida with my parents and my sister, and I got really sick. And I've shared this because it's the first time I ever felt really fucked up in my lungs. I probably didn't word it that way at the age of 4, but yeah, I was hospitalized in Florida, and my parents were so happy they had bought proper health insurance for that trip. Um, but yeah, I just remember not being able to get air into my lungs, and I was hoping my mom would figure out that I wasn't well. You went in '88, the Saturn V, Saturn V, yes, it's a Roman numeral. Sorry, the Saturn V is unreal in bigness. Yeah, I remember that. Ember, I remember like looking up at how big they were, and I was a little kid, right? But I remember looking up at those rockets and being, wow, wow. You were a year old. Oh, I didn't know you were Sumami, I didn't know you were that I didn't even know you were that old. Sumami, no offense, but you look way younger. I thought you were I thought you were younger. But that's just because your skincare regimen is fantastic. Um my skincare regimen is the opposite. So most people assume I'm in my yeah, you're 37. Okay. All right. All right. I as a yeah, I am a motherfucker, right? Um and Ember, I have no idea how old Ember is, but I know she's got to be in the same ballpark as I am. just from the things we've both experienced and remember. Um, I'm pretty sure we're of the same generation. And Sumami's 11 years younger than me. Um, I don't know, Sumami. You look like I don't know, Sumami. I would just sort of have pegged you at about 30, at the oldest, from your looks. But it's not fair to judge people by their looks. It's wrong. But it's still something we do. So I'm gonna talk about my fellowship program, and then I'm gonna stop doing this because I'm not feeling great. Though Ember, yeah, Ember's looks, I would not assume she's older than like 41, 42, and I have no idea what Ember's age is, and she does not have to share anything. So, mommy, it's you're, uh, I don't know. Like yeah, and I don't know. Use the same makeup as Al Drucker, large face, pube forester. Yeah, I don't like calling them face pubes, but if that's how you feel, trees, that's fine. Um, yeah, I mean, I all I can say is when it comes to cunnilingus, there's a bunch of if you get meet up with the right bush, there's a lot of tongue and a lot of hair. Anyway, that's a story for another day. I think I make far too many cunnilingus references, veiled or otherwise. Um, uh, Tsumami seems really, really off put. Oh, you put it in the show, so you're 44. Okay, so yeah, no, if she's 4 years younger than I am, yeah, that totally makes sense, Ember. Um, and I don't know if Tsumami is freaking out about my cunnilingus references or about Ember's age. I have no clue. So yeah, Ember, you look at least 3, 4 years younger than you are. And maybe even younger than that. I don't know how to judge these things. But I look at myself. I actually have this weird thing in the back of my head here that's like swelled up, and my wife wants me to see the doctor if it gets worse. I think it's getting better, but it's I don't know. My daughter, because it's hard, it's weird in the back of my ear, and I can feel it, but it's hard to see where I cut myself shaving. And I've been making these jokes that my head keeps busting open and bleeding because I've been talking to flirfs in like a chat in a Discord server. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, Sumami. What is it? What is it? Are you? Is it because I like to lick carpet? Is it because Ember is uh Ember is far too young looking for her actual chronological age? I have no idea. Anyway, um, before this turns into the cunnilingus hour, I think I've made it clear that I have a vagina fetish, and that's just it is what it is. Um, and I shouldn't talk about my sex life or any of my predilections. That's not what the show is about. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm into what I'm into. Other people are into what they're into. Everybody should do what they like. Um, you know, that's why I was gonna have the 69 sub special. And I think I mentioned I lost a sub. So if you're not subbed and you like what you see, go ahead and sub. If you don't like it, sub anyway. It doesn't cost anything. Trucker Lingus. Oh, trees. My wife won't come with me on the road. She doesn't want to go in a big truck anywhere. So I don't know. I guess she figures the kids need someone to look after them or something like that. But I'm like, there's a bed. There's super good suspension system. A turkey Swiss and bacon sub. Um, yeah, maybe, Tsumami. I'm like pretty intolerant to gluten, so like I'd probably just take the turkey and bacon and the cheese and mix them up. But yeah, I don't know. I want to talk about my fellowship project a little bit because what we're gonna do is we're gonna present stories. This is how this is gonna work. I'm not gonna get into all the details, but unclean beard tickling cooter. um So, mommy, I promise that I wash my beard frequently. At least at a minimum, I wash it daily. Um, Sometimes when I'm on the road, I gotta skip a day because I can't find a place with a clean shower, but I don't usually spend too much time out on the road, so it's not so bad. And there's no cooter I'm getting into on when I'm out on the road. My wife doesn't come with me, and that's I will not go into any further details. Um, anyway, I don't think my wife is into heavy trucking. She doesn't seem to have the same affinity for it that I do. But maybe I'll get her to go for a ride with me one day. Can't get her to go on my motorcycle either. I don't know. She's afraid of something terrible happening. Um, Motorcycles are more dangerous than other vehicles, but I'm not going to stop living my life and enjoying myself just because something's a little bit risky. I do it as safely as I can. I wear all my gear. I'm in all the gear all the time kind of person. All right, so what I'm gonna do with my partner, and I'm not allowed to talk about all the details, but we're gonna tell the stories of people that have had interactions with healthcare workers. So whether it be like a dietitian, a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, whatever, someone who's had an interaction with them, and where their obesity and or diabetes status has been treated poorly, and where they've had less than stellar interpersonal skills, let's say. And we're going to tell these stories, and we're leaning towards a way of telling these stories where I'm going to have to put this all together. So I've come up with one character so far for this thing, and I'm looking for inspiration on characters, because when we do this, I think we're going to sort of anonymize a lot of the stories, and we're going to tell the real stories, and we're going to try to use real dialogue where we can. I'm going to start writing these things out today. So I have one of my own, and I'm going to write mine out. And then what we're thinking, and with my small group of people here, either that watch this or whatever, if you put in the comments, I'd like to know what you think. If you just put in the comments, if you like this idea, that we present these stories in this format of a comic book or a graphic novel. And I say graphic novel not because we would have like an 80-page long story. It would be 1 or 2 pages for each story at the most, and maybe they'd all come together like that, and they'd probably present it online, so they'd be like panels. But what I like about graphic novels is oftentimes they'll have one whole page that has a couple of things going on with it, but it's like a bigger image. Um, where as opposed to a comic book where it's just a bunch of little panels that tell a story one after the other. So yeah, Beamsy, I'm trying to repair my turbo. The Borg Warner air system in my chest is fucking blown. So I either got to rebuild that turbo or figure out a way to get a new one. I don't know if you guys can see how hard I am fighting to stay with you, but I'm having some issues here. Anyway, Beamsy, thanks for coming back. I know, I know, I know things have been funny, but hopefully some bridges will get mended, and if they can't be, I understand. I'm not going to get into that too far. But what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to build bridges between people that work in healthcare and people that live with obesity and diabetes in particular, and get them to both understand how bias and stigma work. And bias and stigma have a lot to do with the conversation I had this weekend with someone who's like, yeah, like for you to lose weight, it's just calories in, calories out. That's all it is. It's just physics. But it ignores all the hormonal intervention that your body does without you asking it to. It ignores what the calories come from and how they're treated by the body's systems. There's a nutrient uptake that happens. There's a lot of things that are affected by how much fiber you intake, how processed the sugars are that you eat. And we actually have evidence. And I got my buddy Dr. Patton is going to help me get the papers on this because there's a couple of them. But they've done some research that has shown there's almost no benefit to just a eat less, move more prescription for how it works. Yeah, it works fine for you, Beamsy. So Beamsy, this is something I encounter this a lot. Um, people that mean really well, and I'm Beamsy. I don't know your story on weight loss, so it's nothing to do with you specifically. I talk to a lot of people who come up to me super well-meaning. I call this the well-meaning friend. Most yeah, okay. Oh, geez, I'm sorry, Sumami. You just got drool? That does sound gross. So I'm just gonna explain. I'm gonna explain the typical story I hear, and this is one that if this is something that you have done to someone living with obesity, please stop doing it. We generally agree we don't want this. Second half of the sentence is also important. Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. You know what? Getting through it is important, and it's a lot. Yeah, no, not in exactly, Beamsy. I appreciate it. This is really important. Not everyone else is me. So what works for some people doesn't work for everyone. But what this is what happens to me often. I've had this happen to me at work a few times. It happens to me all the time. I've had people just like walk up to me and say, "Hey, you're fucking fat." Um, but what people often do. This is the well-meaning friend, I call it. They're like, "Hey, when once I got over 30, I started gaining some weight. I went from 170 pounds, and I was 190 pounds. I gained 20 pounds, and my wife and I sat down and we came up with a plan, and I stopped eating pizza, and I started going to the gym, and I lost 20 pounds, and I gained some muscle, and I gained 5 pounds of muscle, and look at me now, 10 years ago, and I've kept all the weight off, and and I'm like, that's fucking awesome. Um, and I'm like, I said it's hard to lose weight. I appreciate that. I've only lost 80 pounds, but I appreciate how much effort goes into that. And this is the thing. My body stalls out at this weight every goddamn time. I can't get it to move past here. I started Weight Watchers. I was a little lighter than I am today, I think. In 2005, I went to Weight Watchers. I'd already done lots of trying to lose weight by following programs, but this is the first time I walked in and paid somebody money to tell me what to do that I can remember. I might have done other things where like I bought like shakes or whatever. I just don't remember. But I did lots of times where I had a book. It said what to do. I followed what was in the book. The first time I like went to like a support group, if you will. It's great. I lost 25 pounds. Gained it all back. And the thing is I lost 25 pounds, but I gained 40. It wasn't good. Um the 80 pounds I've lost most recently, I lost by doing a combination of keto diet and changing up the way I eat. Um Yeah, this is right. Beamsy, I'm putting this up here because whatever crap has gone on with Beamsy in the past, Beamsy is saying something important here. Get help from professionals. And professionals are not people that are stealing your money to sell you bullshit. And it's not that Weight Watchers is bullshit. Like Weight Watchers is I haven't been there in a while, but I've read up on them. They're basically a program that instead of counting calories, they help you move it into a point system, and they have these other ways of approaching it, and they've adopted like a low carb version because that's popular or whatever. But um a lot of these programs are run to make money. They're not successful if you're successful. They're successful if they can get big names to lose some weight and say it was with them and do that, right? No, Sumami. So Weight Watchers does have some. They do have some like recommended meals. Like you can go buy branded stuff. Um, when I go through surgery, I go up 130 and then go. Okay, so yeah, like where they send you. No, so that's not what Weight Watchers is. Jenny Craig is a program like that. I've seen that in action. My mom did it. I decided not to. Um, my mom's been doing Noom and doing really well. But she's not. My mom's never been fighting obesity. She's just been a little bit overweight. 130, 140 kilos, and then back down to 90 kilos when you recover. So about 300 pounds in freedom units. Yeah. So I know pounds just because, like, I'm in Canada and, like, I don't know, we weigh ourselves in pounds. We measure ourselves. We measure our height in feet and inches, and we measure the distance to the post office in kilometers. Um, so yeah, so Beamsy, I'm a bit bigger than you are. Um, yeah, and so, but not by like a tremendous amount. And Beamsy, I'm glad you're able to regulate things with your diet and look after yourself. I'm just not able. I'm not able to get down past 330 ish, 325, 330. I always stall out here. I seem to always come back to this weight. I've been coming back to this weight for 20 years now. Um, and I always plateau here. So I'm hoping that the bariatric surgery will help me get through that and get me back to a better weight. Bariatric surgery does a lot of different things. So mommy, there's a lot of ones where they'll do that, and my sister even helped me do that a few years ago. She I couldn't afford it, but she paid for it. My sister was extremely generous to me, and I ate these meals. They were great. She bought a bunch of them and from a place in Toronto and just shipped them to me. Um, and my wife is just checking with me. Yeah, okay. I just let it. I have to get a prescription for my son, and I've got it all set up. So I want to tell these stories to people using like this comic book thing, and I think my partner's in with the. So I'd like to know if people that watch this think that would be effective, and also whether if they were still images, would it be better if some of them were animated and if there were voices saying things out loud, or whether you'd rather just read it? And then the other thing is, I was planning on narrating it anyway somehow. And so the reason I want to narrate it, and I'd like some input on this because I don't know if I have any sight impaired people here, but we have a sight impaired person involved in our fellowship program, and I got a chance to meet him. And I also, my friend that died this summer, also had lost his sight, and I was getting to know a little bit more about what it's like to live without sight. And I've known a couple of people that were hard of hearing in my family, and but I've never learned sign language. I've never had to deal with like a person who was deaf who lived their whole life that way. So it was always people with unable to hear if they didn't have assistance from like a hearing device, like a hearing aid or something. And my wife actually worked at a hearing aid company, so she was pretty familiar with hearing loss issues. But she didn't like solve people's problems. She did something else there, but she was just being in the industry. She was aware of it. Something I was far more aware of was hearing loss than sight loss. But sight loss is something that's always scared the fuck out of me. And when you're diabetic, like retinal neuropathy is a very common side effect and terrible outcome. And so I was thinking, I'm making these visual things. I want to make them, but I also would want them to be like audible. I'd like there to be like that. And I also am trying to make sure that they're available in French and English in my country because that's where we're doing this. We're doing it for a Canadian audience. And I'm also trying to make sure that we could maybe find a couple of native languages to make them available. And when I say native, I mean for Indigenous peoples. There's a lot of different terms used, like First Nations peoples, and they've been colloquially called Indians in the past, and I think that's been decided that that's an incorrect term. And I mean no offense by that. I'm not using it as a slur. I'm just putting it out there as that's something that's used a lot. And I also know that the people I know who are Indigenous in background self-refer to them that way, and in the same way that I might call myself fat, but I'd rather that people don't call me that. But I tend not to do that. I tend not to refer to myself that way. What I'm trying to do is refer to myself as a person that lives with obesity because it's a disease. The Inuit people are in the north here, being the yes. So there's a lot of different indigenous groups or tribes or nations in Canada. There's the Inuit, and they speak a language that I think is called Inuktitut, but I'm probably pronouncing it badly. They have their own language. They have a tremendous northern culture. It's aesthetically just amazing. Um, they do these amazing carvings, um, and and um, and then the West Coast. The West Coast are the ones that are well known for making the totem poles, and I'm blanking on the name of that nation for some reason. I'm really terrible at remembering the names of things, and then other times I know the nomenclature for everything. It's a weird thing about my brain, but yeah, there's a big sort of nation on the West Coast is known for that. I think is it the Haida maybe, and they're known for the totem poles, which are sort of really iconic, and the soapstone carvings and other art from the Inuit are amazing, but also their hunting skills, their skills of living off the land in like a very barren area without trees and other sort of things that people think of like for bush living. Like when you, for myself, like growing up around like forested areas and stuff. I grew up in the city, but like we could easily travel to get to a forested area and practice some bushcraft and stuff. I did that in the scouts and stuff. Um, I'd learned just like fishing and stuff and becoming a hunter. I've learned some bushcraft, but when there's trees and stuff around, it seems sort of obvious what to do. If you're just out like on the tundra or you're out on like the ice, like man, you're working with very little, very little. It's amazing. I'm always super impressed, just super impressed by what the Inuit do. Um, we have like there's just so many nations out here. Yeah. Oh, Beamsy, I'll talk about that in a second, but and I'm the last person that should be talking about indigenous cultures. Growing up in Toronto originally, and just there's a few around, but like you go a little bit north, or you go out west, you go down east. They're far more prominent because they're bigger parts of their communities. Because in Toronto, there might be more of them living in Toronto than anywhere else, but they blend in. Um, they blend in with everybody else. You just don't notice. Um, you don't notice that they're there because there isn't like um, some little group of them all living together on like what they call a reserve here. But you can travel a couple of hours away from Toronto and find some reserves, right? And so like then every other person you meet or every person you meet will be indigenous background. Um, and they have different rules on their territories. Taxation is different there, so it's sort of weird because like you enter an area that's run by indigenous people, and things are a little different there. So they tend to sell cigarettes and gas to people that are non-indigenous people, and they go there to save a few bucks on taxes. So people will sort of line up to get in there and do that here and there. Um, but the bottom line is, um, it doesn't really teach you much about the culture if all you're doing is getting gas and cigarettes. Um, some of the nicer stores have like a lot of sort of stuff there that you can buy, but a lot of it sort of seems a little cheesy at some of them, and other ones it's really high quality, wonderful stuff. But that's not really what I want to talk about. But this is something I will mention. This Beamsy, yeah, we do have high fructose corn syrup is a problem, and we do have that here. One of the problems that Canadians have, being next to the Americans, and they're like, we know so many Americans here in this community, and this is a global community, although it tends to be very English centric because like, but we have people like Beamsy's in Australia, I believe, Sumami's in the U.S. for sure, Ember's in the U.S. for sure. Jimmy was here earlier. I know he's somewhere in the Midwest, like maybe Chicago area, something like that. Um, I can't remember who else has come by here. Trees is here. I think Trees is down. Are you down in Appalachia or Appalachia? I'm not sure what the proper pronunciation is. Um, Bottom line is, I want to say that yeah, one of the things I've brought up, and it's been brought up to me by different people. My partner and I both, in the fellowship, we both have experienced firsthand and in terrible ways the food deserts that are there. We call them food deserts. Yeah, I know Beamsy, it's okay. I don't expect you to stay up to watch my streams. And I won't be doing these forever once I get back to work. I won't be able to keep this up. I just won't be able to. I'm not sure where I'm at right now. You're getting emotionally attached to your baby in The Sims. All right, Sumami. Well, you know what? Just try to make sure you separate real life from digital life to some degree. But American culture affects Canadian culture, and it affects our food, and we share food back and forth across the border. So a lot of times, what'll happen is a Canadian raw product will get sent to the U.S. and get processed and sent back to us, or we'll import American products that are just popular here. Um, and there's a lot of trade. There's some free trade agreements between U.S., Canada, and Mexico that try to like keep free trade. Free trade doesn't mean that there's no taxation or tariffs. It just means they're not punitive, basically. So there'll still be some the shipping of stuff and the paying of duties and stuff like that on products that come out of a different country are there, and they do slow people down. Like I've had situations where the cost of duties on a product are so outlandish that I'm just not going to bother. I'm just not going to bother getting the item at all. Um, I've seen situations where like I want to buy an item that's $40 American. The duties are $30 American, and the shipping is $30 American. I'm just not going to get that. If I drive down to the US for some other reason, I'm there on vacation or I'm traveling there, and I can buy the item in the store, I'll pick it up and it'll either be like, because I mean, $40, I think you're allowed to spend something like $200 if you're gone for 48 hours or something per person. If my whole family goes down, we don't have $800 to spend. So we're going to be under that. It ain't going to be a problem. But that's sort of how it works. So, but when it comes to like shipping like big like truckloads or train loads of stuff back and forth across the border, there's agreements on how that's done so that companies can make money without punitive stuff happening. And so, yeah, if there's high fructose corn syrup in an American product, we end up with it on our shelves. And I think we put high fructose corn syrup in our own products. A lot of the companies that run major food production are U.S. based companies. So that's a thing that happens and is a major factor, I think, in our day to day lives. So what I try to do is, and my wife is behind me with this. It's generally pretty good. There's a few things that aren't perfect, but it's generally pretty good. So what ends up working for us, and I really appreciate this, is that I will I will have fresh fruits and vegetables. We'll have fresh lean meats. We'll have salads. We'll have snacks that are high in protein, and so there might be something that's packaged. So there'll be like a lot of nut butters, and then I also get like dark chocolate chips to throw in and add a little bit of sweetness because I appreciate that, but I try to be good with that. And I've been having these cereals in the morning, which I'm probably gonna need to bring my sugars up again a little bit. So yeah, I'm gonna end this here to say that if you're watching this in the future, if you watched it now, and you have any ideas about what's a good way to communicate with people, and whether or not you appreciate the idea of having these little sort of comic style interactions where characters move through a couple of panels, and maybe there's like one big panel, and then maybe there's even an animation happening. I'm curious what people think about that. I just sort of would like it's like sort of a little focus group. Um, would people here appreciate that? And like when you see communications online, what is it that floats your boat in terms of getting a message across? Like, memes are good, but I don't want to just make memes. I want to make something a little more storytelling than just a quick little um, two panel thing where it's just like the cat screaming at the woman um, in the restaurant or whatever it is. Um, you guys know what I'm talking about. There's like a cat and a woman freaking out. I can't remember what it's all about, but that meme is just over and over, right? I want to get something a little more than that, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So if people have any input on that, I appreciate it. I am really not feeling great. Um, my body's kind of giving up on me right now at the moment, so I'm sorry. I don't know why it keeps doing this to me, but I do appreciate everybody's support, and even though it was a great thing to piss somebody off enough that they unsub from me, I do need more subs because if I can get 500 subs, I can make little I can make little emojis, and emojis are the whole reason to exist on the internet, aren't they? Thank you, Ember, and thank you, Beamsy, Sumami, Trees, Jimmy. Anybody else is here. If you're lurking or you're just listening and you're busy, I appreciate that you came by to listen to me. And so remember, when you see somebody living with obesity, there's two things we all want you to know. The first one is we already know we're living with obesity, and the second one is we're really happy for you or your friend or whoever that had this thing that worked and changed their whole lives. We're really happy for you, but we might be in a situation where we just haven't been able to get there. Hey, Victoria, good to see you. Appreciate your support. Yeah, you're lurking there. That's all right. That's all right. It's hard sometimes. I often am lurking and not talking, or I come in to say hi and I get distracted by something else, and I come back and I try to listen in the background. So I totally understand how these things work, and people are living their lives, working, looking after their home, their family, or just themselves, and then they're just participating by being a set of ears and a mind to give things some thought. Hopefully, I've presented some things to think about. If nothing else, I've saved myself a therapy session by just spilling out a bunch of things I'm thinking about. I'm gonna go rest up and get some food in me, and then I'm gonna try to work on storyboarding out some of these stories we want to tell. And again, if anybody's watching, they happen to be Canadian and they have direct experience or indirect experience living with obesity and diabetes, even as a caregiver or something like that, I'm looking to collect more stories to tell, and I can tell you where this stuff can happen. Do not compare, yeah. Storyboard, waterboard. No, it's better than it's smaller than a waterboard. It might be better. And yeah, Beams, 4 acres of land. Yeah, I only have an acre, and we have had vegetable gardens. We have a little herb garden right now. I think I don't know, this year with my health, having my kidney issues in the spring and my lung issues in the summer, there was no way we were going to even grow a single carrot, but I think we managed to grow some dill and some other herbs in the herb garden. My wife and my daughter are very good at having green thumbs. My wife's an amazing gardener. She's got our whole front area is looking fantastic because of her work there. But she doesn't have a lot of time to put into maintaining it, but she's done what she could. And yeah, if you ever come by my house and it looks like it's falling apart, it's for a lot of reasons. But usually it's because we're too busy, and right now it's because I'm too sick, and that's making everyone else too busy. So anyway, it's another long, crazy, good rambling goodbye from Al. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and I'm sure I'll be catching people out there on YouTube and Discord and whatnot. And I got to remember how to get back to Gather, because I know some of you guys are over there and gals too, and I should go hang out and have a chat. Hopefully just not be feeling so rough when I remember how to get back over there. But I love you guys. Thank you so much. See you next time.